Welcome to part 2 of Knut's top Sibelius tips. The previous episode was all about the stuff you do before you get into the actual workspace in Sibelius, whereas this episode is going to be about sort of navigational stuff and other sorts of like basic functionality that you do in the actual workspace. That doesn't include the actual arranging. Like in the last episode, this will be sort of 3 tips about stuff that isn't like obvious when you use the workspace. If you haven't seen the previous episode, I will link it on the screen now, and if you have, then just enjoy the rest of the video. Tip number 1 about sort of basic workspace functionality. Work in Panorama mode. So when you work in Sibelius, it can display the score in like various different sort of ways. You can have just page by page, you can have them side by side or on top of each other. By far the most useful one is called Panorama because it kind of lays out the music as though it's like an infinite sheet of music. So you get a linear representation from start to finish of the music. And I think what's really useful about Panorama mode is that you don't have to think about layout while you're arranging. Layout is kind of, it's a topic all on its own, and it's something you will want to save that for last. You never start doing layout until you're really finished with the arrangement. I'll get into that later. But yeah, let me show you why Panorama mode is so useful. This is an arrangement I'm working on, and if I'm looking at it in just this normal side-by-side view, then, I mean, at the moment it looks okay. There are some overlapping elements, but I do have to be very mindful of the layout if I were to work in this view. There's system breaks, there's page turns. If I'm like zoomed in quite a bit and I'm working like this, for instance, then I have to like find the next place like this. It's just a bit clunky. So the panorama view kind of prevents this problem. So if you check down here, Panorama, that's the one you want. Click it, and suddenly, nice, long, infinite sheet of music. From left to right. Left at the start, all the way to the right, that's the end. So you then don't have to worry about the layout at all. I mean, you might have to like drag these apart a bit if you get a lot of symbols and expression marks and stuff like that. But you don't have to worry about system breaks, page turns, nothing like that. So you can just do the entire arrangement like this, and then when it's all ready, just jump back to one of these and then work on making it look nice. Yeah, Panorama mode, very useful. Tip number 2. There are various different ways of selecting stuff in Sibelius, and it's important to know when to use each. When you're selecting stuff in Sibelius, you will talk about either system select or staff select. Staff select is anything that's on a staff and doesn't include the other staves, and that will be kind of the most common sort of select you'll do. Whereas system select will select all the staves and also include system stuff, like it'll include time signatures, key signatures, and any text you've set to be like system text. And the advantage of using system select is that because it copies stuff like the time signatures, if you're well, excuse me, if you're selecting stuff that needs to be repeated, where time signature changes, for instance, you definitely need to use system select. Because you then avoid a situation where it doesn't copy the time signature. But let me show you exactly how they're different and how you can tell and when to use them. So yeah, as I said, there are various different ways you can select stuff in Sibelius. Sort of the most obvious one is just clicking on individual things. So if I click on that note, then that's what's selected, that note alone. Click on that rehearsal mark, that's all that's selected. Click on that double bar line, that's all that's selected. If you want to select several things, there are a few ways of doing that. First of all, you can normal select one thing, hold down shift, and then it's a bit like you're just selecting a continuous stream of things. So if I hold down shift and press that note there, then I've selected everything up to that point on that staff. Now you see this is colored in blue, not the notes, but the outline, the sort of light blue outline, that means it's a staff select. So what that means, it selects object on the staff. If I then hold down shift and, for instance, go down to this note here, you'll see it then selects everything on the staves down to there. And this is again just staff. So if I now copy this and then I can go paste it in. If I, for whatever reason wanted to just like stick it at the end here, boom, there it is. And it just, whatever you select it just sort of puts it in right there. It doesn't really worry about stuff like the time signature and the key signature and stuff. It just sticks that quite literally in and fits it to whatever's already there. The other way of selecting things is a bit more, should we say, exhaustive. It selects everything you could possibly select, and it's called system select. So if I go back to that phrase, I can't find it. It doesn't matter. So let's say from here, if I hold down Option and press somewhere here. Actually, I need to select essentially a place on the staff that isn't like an object. So say here. See how it selects everything, and it's all in sort of a purple outline. That means you have system select. And this is the most complete way you can select something because it includes stuff like system objects. So say that I would then hold down shift and I wanted to just do up to this point. It will also select the rehearsal mark and this double bar line. Now compare this to if I were to select using normal staff select, shift, hold it down to there, and you see it's just light yellow. If I then go to the same point, that bar line and that rehearsal mark, they're not selected. So if I do, so again, hold down Option, and you get system select, copy that and stick it at the end. And you'll see that, there's a rehearsal mark and a double bar line here. Where this gets useful is if you have things like key signatures. So this is a somewhat well-known pop song that has a few key changes. And if I wanted to make sure that I capture, say for whatever reason, I got to the end, I'm in everyone's favorite key, F sharp, no, not even, C sharp major. And I just wanted to jump straight back down to the initial key of A major. Or even, let's make it fun, let's say I want to jump down to B flat major. Select using system select. And if you go across, let's look here, if I just go across like this, that selects the key signature as well, which means that will be copied to the end, like so. So you can just consider staff select is sort of just selects what's on the staff, whereas a system select selects everything on the whole system. Yeah, you want to make sure that you're using the right one, especially if you have stuff like time signature changes, because naturally if you have a phrase that's in 3/4, but the place you want to paste it is in 4/4, you're going to run into problems. I mean, Sibelius will do it, it'll just try and fit it within the other time signature, and so you'll probably not end up with the result you want. But yeah, that's pretty much what you need to know about selecting stuff. Tip number 3, and final sort of functionality tip for the day. Learn your key commands. Key commands are essentially just little shortcuts you can use. And what's good about them is you can speed up, your work process. There are some that are kind of common with other applications. So I work on a Mac, so I'll know which ones to use on a Mac. There'll be different ones on Windows. But the same shortcut you'd use for opening documents in Word will probably be the same in Sibelius. But there's a few special ones that are definitely quite useful. I'll show you which ones I commonly use. It's not going to be like an exhaustive list, but it'll be kind of the ones that I find the most useful. Right, I'm just going to list off a few key commands that I commonly use. There's pretty much a key command for everything in Sibelius. And in fact, you can make your own key commands if you go into the preferences, which, I mean, if there's certain functions you use a lot and you think you should have a key command for it, then, go ahead and do it. Some of them are obvious, like, option S is save, option O is open, option W is close, and option Q is quit. Those are shortcuts that are shared with other applications. But then there are those that only Sibelius uses. For instance, respell accidental, which is important if you've got well, if you essentially have the wrong accidental. So let's imagine that I wanted this F sharp to be a G flat. Well, I wouldn't, because this isn't the key of of A major, but if I want it, it's just enter. And then you press enter, it goes back. Enter is also used for breaking system when doing the layout. So if I go into the page views and I wanted to break system here, I just select the bar line and press enter, and that breaks the system. Some commands will be different depending on the context, so depending on what you have selected. Other important ones are slur. If I wanted to slur this together, just select it all and press S, and that creates a nice little slur. You also have hairpins or crescendos. That's just H for hairpin. You also have decrescendos. That's Shift H. That creates a decrescendo. If you want to create dynamics, like these dynamics here, that is Option E. That creates, and then remember to hold down Option while you write in the dynamics. So if I wanted this to go suddenly, I don't know, SF, holding down Option, you get the nice font. And also you make sure that Sibelius will actually play back the dynamics. Then there's just for opening certain panels. So for lines, it's L, and you see that opens up the line panel, and you have everything from, tempo indications to certain, interpretive things like trills, endings, etc. If you want to open up the symbol panel, that's Z, and that has symbols like, divide arrows, caessuras, and various bits of like trills and stuff if you're writing Baroque music. You also have key signatures, time signatures, and clefs. These are all over here. You can open up time signature by pressing T, and then you can either select one or, press this if you need something a bit more advanced. K is for key signature. These are all divided into sharp, major keys, minor keys, etc. And for clef, it's not C, as you might think, it's Q. I remember in the tutorial in Sibelius, it's supposed to be like clef, like with a Q instead of a C. And when I read that, I thought that's really stupid. But incidentally, I've never forgotten it since. Yeah, Q opens up the clef. What does C do? Oh yeah, well, that's literally for the music note C. But yeah, speaking of which, I mean, if you're typing in notes, you press N to go into note input, and then you can press C, D, E, F, G, etc. to press those in. One more we have is chord symbol. That is Option K. So Option C is copy, obviously. So just remember it's chord with a K, like Knut with a K. Option K, and then you can write in. So I wanted this, if I wanted to show the sopranos that they're singing on an A chord, then I'll just write A. And if I were naughty, I'd write E flat. Another important key command is the various filter commands. So if you select, for instance, this phrase and all you want are the lyrics, then you can filter the lyrics by pressing Shift Alt L. Or if you just wanted the notes, you can press Shift Alt N. That gives you just the notes. There's other things you can filter, like you can filter the dynamics with Shift Alt D for dynamics. That will select both expression text and hairpins. Anyway, there's so many things there are key commands for. If you wonder what the key command is, normally you can just hold your mouse cursor over, and if there's a key command for it, it'll show up on the side. So, so here for the slow, crescendo, and decrescendo, those have the key commands in parentheses. Barline doesn't have one, but key signature does. T, K, Q, and so on and so forth. Now, if you wanted to filter something very specific, like you only wanted to filter, the second topmost note in these chords, then you can do an advanced filter. So that's Shift, Option, Alt, F. And this pops up, and it has all sorts of things you can select. Like literally, you can only select the note A, but only if it has a specific note head and is in a specific octave. So it's a very, very detailed filter. I don't think I've ever had to use it to such a detailed degree, but it is an option if you have to use it. Those are 3 tips for navigating and using the workspace more efficiently. In the next episode, we're going to get into the actual arranging. Until then, remember to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and share it with your friends if you think they'll find it useful. And I'll see you next week.